I want to paint a picture to our listeners of who you were and where you came from. So you were born and raised in Chicago, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about what you were like as a child.
What I was like as a child? Mm-hmm. Well, I had two loving parents, my mother and father. My father was an immigrant from Yugoslavia. And when he came to America, he didn't have a penny in his pocket or speak any English. He was a prisoner of war during the World War II. The Nazis took him, and he was in a German prisoner of war camp for 4 years. And then after that, he was in a refugee camp for 3 years until the United States Congress, that one day his youngest son, me, would become a member of, passed a law called the Displaced Persons Act, which allowed my father and millions of others like us from Eastern Europe with these long and hard-to-pronounce last names a chance to come here. Mm-hmm. He was a factory worker, my dad, and worked real hard. He loved America, really truly believed in the gift of freedom, felt that there was no place like this place when it came to opportunity. And even though his ship never came in and he was always a working man, he believed that his sacrifice and hard work would one day pay off, and that what he couldn't have for himself could happen for his two boys, his sons, my older brother and me. Mm-hmm. And before calamity came into my life, he was right. I mean, I became the governor of the fifth largest state at a very young age, second youngest governor in modern political history in Illinois. Mm-hmm. So his dream in so many ways for this country was very real. Now, my mom was a working mom. Mm-hmm. She worked for the public transportation system here, the CTA, taking fares and transfers, taking fares and passing out transfers at the subway stations. Okay. We lived in a little 5-room apartment. They never owned a home. It was all about working hard for their children to give us opportunities they didn't have. So I had loving parents and good parents and great parents. And, I've lost them a long time ago, both of them. But, they're always with me. I always feel their spirit with me. So I went to public school in Chicago, kind of a rough neighborhood. I wasn't exactly setting the world on fire in school. Mm-hmm. Here I go again, but that D in algebra I got was a common case of grade inflation. There I deserved an F.
Okay.
But still, I was able to learn things and went on to college. I always worked. My first job was when I was 9 years old as a shoe shine boy, and I had that job until I was 13.
So when you were that age, what would you say you wanted to do? Were you charismatic? Were you good with people? Did you know you wanted to do something with people, for people?
Well, I wanted to be a professional athlete. I wanted to be a baseball player, but I sucked.
Okay, I was going to say, could you play?
No, I wasn't that good. My brother was good. My older brother was really good. Mm-hmm. And then I changed my dream to try to be an NBA basketball player because there you can develop your skills by yourself and play on the schoolyard, which was about a block and a half from where we lived. I was there all the time, perfecting my jump shot and my dribbling. And I could spin a basketball on all 5 fingers of my right hand. I'm the only governor in Illinois history who can do that.
Oh, wow.
If you see this governor that we have today, he can't do that, nor can he run a mile. I've run 3 marathons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But my high school basketball coach didn't share the confidence I had in my jump shot, and so I spent most of that time on the bench. And so then I was shifting my dreams to something else, and I liked history. I always liked to read history books, even though I wasn't exactly, a scholar in high school. I did read a lot of history books, and so I had dreams that maybe one day I could get, I could maybe get into the political arena and do something.
Part of history.
Yes, and I have made history in a very negative way, and I have to live long so I could change my obituary because I don't like my place in history because it's so wrong.
Okay, well, we'll get to that, but keep filling me in here. I love it. Wait, you liked history. By the way, have you seen Hamilton?
I haven't, but I had a man crush on Alexander Hamilton in the 70s.
Okay.
I was into Hamilton before it was cool. He's truly one of the great Americans, one of the greatest Americans. And what to play Hamilton it was based upon a book that I had read when I was in prison. The biographer also wrote a biography on George Washington. His name is Ron Chernow. And Lynn Miranda, I read an article in a magazine when I was sheltering in place that he had got the idea to write this book from the book that he had purchased at an airport when he was taking a flight somewhere. Yep. And I'd read that book before that Lynn Miranda did, because I love Hamilton, always have. But what he doesn't do, and here's where they kind of tell you a little bit of the history, a lot of the history, and I'm sure a lot of it's accurate, but I'm sure what they didn't do in that play, I haven't seen it, so I could be wrong, but I bet you they didn't say that before Hamilton was killed in that duel at Weehawken Heights on the 11th of July in 1804, early in the morning with Aaron Burr. And among his last words were, my vision is indistinct, I fear, this wound is fatal. Later on, at his deathbed, before his loving wife Eliza, he says, Eliza remembered his children weeping and crying. He said, Eliza, remember, we are Christians. What they don't say, the sort of liberal interpretation of Hamilton was that when his political fortunes had soured and had gone, and he was isolated politically towards the end of his life, and his son had lost a duel defending his father's honor 2 years before, his oldest boy, his firstborn. What they don't say is that he had visions of establishing a third political party called the Christian Constitutional Party. And I would suggest to your listeners and your viewers that they should take a look and check my facts. But you'll see that it's right. But I bet you, as well as this Lin Miranda did in that play, I bet you he didn't put that in there.
Well, there probably wasn't enough time. It was quite long, and you probably can't make a rap about that.
Anyway, I'd like to see it, but I was.
It's very good.
Yeah.
You should see it,
I bet.
especially since you know so much about it. That
He's
was
fantastic.
a great history lesson you just gave.
Well, thank you.
Something that he and you share is their love for their wife. So talk to me about how you met Patty.
So I met Patty on March the 8th, 1988. It was a Sunday evening, probably around 7:15, 7:30. It was at a fundraiser for her father, who was a local Chicago ward political boss and an alderman. And I was a young prosecutor at the time, and I was leaving the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to go into private practice. And I had made friends with some judges, and one judge in particular had been a friend of mine and had grown up, had been part of the Young Democrat Party in the 60s and knew my future father-in-law. Long story short was that the judge said that the Alderman Mel, was having a fundraiser. He was running to be elected to a larger position as judge in Cook County. That we elect our judges, which frankly is not the best system. These judges are all political at the highest levels, but okay, that's a different conversation. But he was a nice guy. His name was great guy actually, Judge Saul Anthony Perdomo. But he said that Patty's dad, my wife Patty's dad, had said that my future wife had just broken up with her boyfriend, who she was in love with in Florence, Italy. He was an Italian from Florence. He was a Florentine. And she met him in school there. And they were at an impasse on which one was going to leave and move to the other. And Patty had brought him to Chicago. She made a tactical mistake because she brought him in December. It's really cold here.
Yeah.
This guy's name is Massimo. I met him later on, years later. Very nice guy, excellent guy, very Italian. And in fact, he was scolding me on how I was drinking my cappuccino. And he said, cappuccino is for breakfast, not after dinner.
Do that like that.
But anyway,
so he couldn't hack the
cold
weather,
and he wouldn't move here, and she didn't want to leave her parents. And anyway, they were at an impasse, and that relationship.
And it all worked out for you.
And I was the guy on the rebound because I met her like 4 days later. Her father asked the judge. The judge said, "I got this young state's attorney. He's a good guy." And he said, "Bring him along. I'd like him to meet my daughter." And so it was sort of quasi-arranged.
Right.
And she was wearing a red dress, and I remember I was single then, and I was, I've lived a pretty. I'm not here to say, my life's been eventful. Let me put it that way, in various ways, and so I remember saying to her, I'd like to call you, I'd like to take you out, and I remember saying, "I'll show you the time of your life."
That's an understatement.
Boy, I'd say I never envisioned anything like that.
Right.
But she was really it was special when I first met her, when I got to know her a little bit after that first meeting. And she was so good to my mother, who had just lost my father. And it didn't take long, and I was in love with her very soon. And it was like my first winning campaign. I had to persuade her that, I was the right guy. And, I think I did, but I don't know that she to this day thinks that maybe that was the right decision.
So before then, were you into politics at all? What were you doing specifically when you met?
Well, I was a young lawyer, and I was prosecuting cases.
Oh, you are? Okay.
The Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley, at the time was the elected Cook County State's Attorney, and I was one of about 800 prosecutors in his office. I never met my boss.
Okay.
When I worked for him, he was way up high, and I was like a traffic court, and then in the misdemeanor branch courts way low. I would only meet him later on when I got into politics, and then years later, it didn't take long. Actually, 12 years later, I'm now the governor, and he thinks I still work for him, right?
Right.
But I was interested in politics, and I'd helped a few candidates, one in particular at the local level. But there was no really path for me to get into it. It was not realistic. I was just trying to make a living, and frankly, learn how to be a lawyer. And so there was no real time to try to pursue that. And then I just happened to meet Patty and fall in love with Patty, and then her dad
had a huge influence in that.
And then he found himself in a political position that was difficult for him, and he was scrambling at the last minute to look for a candidate, and he just happened to have a lawyer in the family who, he felt and I think he was right. Had an ability to go out and, make a lot of promises.
Right.
Right. And so then I got involved. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then before we move too far forward, I just want to say, before all this, what were some of the other jobs you had in your life before that?
Well, I've had a lot of different jobs. So, my first job, full-time job, was every day after school shining shoes. Mm-hmm. I started when I was in the 3rd grade and finished when I was finished grade school, 8th grade. So I had every year. And then I had jobs delivering pizzas in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I had jumped a couple times, mugged.
Did you?
Yeah, it was kind of a rough neighborhood, in the southern part of it.
Did you ever get hurt? Well,
yeah, sure, but I bossed the Golden Glove, so it was like I was fighting back. But yeah, I got jumped at. I always remember that it was at Augusta Boulevard in Central, the west side of Chicago, and these two guys were waiting at the stoop, and I've got the pizza, and I knew the woman that was ordering the food, because you got to know who the customers were, and. I'm sure she was a nice woman, but she never tipped.
Oh, God.
And you're kind of going in a rough area, and you're not going to get a tip. And here's these two guys sitting on the stoop, I ring the doorbell. It was the disco era, the late 70s, and the jeans were really tight. And I had my money, in my pockets, and these guys were standing there. You had the pizza inside the box to keep it warm, and there was a bag with like fried chicken in it that was ordered, and the bill was like $13 and some change. And she gave me a $20 bill, which was hopeful to me because I'd have to give her change, and a lot of times the customer would say, "I just keep $1," right? Which was a good tip back then.
Okay.
But I would have been lucky for a quarter, frankly. Well, she wanted every bit of it, and I gave her all back. And I remember saying to myself, "No tip." Turned around. Next thing I know, this guy gives me a right cross across the face, and I was like stunned. And the two of them, give us your mother. Can I swear?
Yeah.
Give us your money, motherfucker. Right. And then when I came to my senses, because I bossed Golden Gloves, I had a decent right hand, and I was able to hit one of them. And then I was able to extricate myself from the other guy dragging me. I got to my car where I had a pipe. You always kept a little weapon in there, but I should have had it with me when I walked up. And then I was able to ward him off. As I'm driving back, I'm spitting part of my back tooth out because my mouth was closed when I got hit. And then I got into the pizza place, and my boss, an immigrant from Sicily, great guy. His name was Joe DeVita. And his wife, she was great. She was really nice, and she really liked me. They both had she had a real strong Italian accent. She recently had moved to America. He had come here at a young age, but he still had a slight accent. And, I was bleeding a little bit, and I was a little bit angry. Jesus Christ, Joe, you sent us to a place where they never tip. And he goes, did they get the money? No, they didn't get the money, and I gave them the money. And she's over there nursing me. She was so sweet. And
so did he tip you for keeping the money? Did he give you a little bonus?
No, he didn't. But
oh, gosh.
He had a business to run, and he had he had other drivers he had to take care of. But so I had that job, and I worked at a meatpacking plant in Philadelphia the summer of 1977. It was actually in Chester, Pennsylvania, a place called Medford Meats. Back then they did the Franks for the Phillies games, the hot dogs for the Phillies games. I don't know if they do it now. Well, then I had a couple of jobs on the Alaskan pipeline. When I was right out of high school, I was able to get a job up there because my father left us at the age of 63 to take a job at the Alaskan pipeline as a janitor because the pay was so good.
Right.
So I spent 2 summers working on the Alaskan pipeline, washing pots and pans, 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, double time on Sundays, time and a half over 40. Right. And then...
great place to learn some good values.
Yeah. And surprisingly, as you know, you being from Anchorage, but up in Fairbanks, I was at a place called Pump Station 6, so it was about 90 miles north of Fairbanks. But in the summertime, much to my real surprise, there were all these mosquitoes. I don't think people realize, but in Alaska in the summer, there's a lot of mosquitoes up there.
Yeah.
And they're really big, right?
Yeah.
When I met Sarah Palin, by the way, I remember telling her about that. And then we talked a little bit about that, and then I mentioned that I had a law school roommate that was from Palmer, Alaska. And she asked me what his name was. And I said, really? Alaska is so small, you might know this guy? And it turned out, not only did she know him, she appointed him Attorney General of the state of Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his name is Talis Kolberg. Excellent guy, by the way.
It's a small place.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, that is something.